She said she was happier alone, not angry, not shouting, just steady. She said it like she'd whispered it to herself 100 times in the mirror before finally saying it out loud. And I stood there blinking, frozen, trying to act like it. Didn't hurt, so I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I had nothing else to offer in that moment. That's what we do, isn't it? When something feels too big, too real, we deflect, we joke, we pretend it's not happening. I figured she just needed space, a night away, time to cool off. But that morning, she moved through the house like someone who had made peace with her decision long before she ever spoke it out loud. No drama, no last-minute begging. She folded her sweater carefully, zipped her suitcase, left a grocery list on the counter, like it was just another Tuesday. There wasn't a fight. There wasn't even a goodbye, just one last glance and a smile, not cruel, not bitter, just free. And in that moment, I knew she wasn't running away. She wasn't broken. She wasn't mine to fix. She had finally found something I never gave her, herself. I used to believe that women who lived alone were sad, unchosen, incomplete. I used to think a woman without a man was a woman who had failed at love. But I was wrong. She didn't choose solitude because she had no options. She chose it because she was done settling for half-love, done sitting across the table from someone who never really saw her. Done explaining why silence at dinner hurt more than yelling ever could. I thought I was a good man. I paid the bills. I came home every night. I didn't cheat, didn't hit, didn't raise my voice. But I also didn't ask how she was doing. Didn't notice when her laughter started to disappear. Didn't hold her when she needed softness instead of solutions. Some nights I heard her crying in the bathroom, and I stayed in bed, still, pretending I didn't hear. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't know what to do with pain that didn't come with instructions. She didn't leave all at once. She left in moments, in every time I turned away. Every time I stayed quiet when I should have leaned in. Every time I convinced myself she'd get over it. And now, with nothing left but silence, I finally understand. She didn't leave because she stopped loving me. She left because she started loving herself more than the version of her that disappeared to keep me comfortable. And maybe you've been there too. Maybe you've heard her crying behind the door and didn't know how to reach her. Maybe you've watched her pack her things quietly and you stood there frozen, not angry, just empty. If any part of this feels familiar, drop a line below. Just one. I'm learning how to show up without disappearing, because maybe she didn't walk away from love. Maybe she walked toward herself. And now, maybe it's your turn. In the first few days after she left, I thought the stillness meant things were getting better. No more awkward dinners. No more tension stretching between the couch cushions. No more walking on eggshells in my own home. The house felt quieter, lighter even. Like maybe I could finally breathe, but breathing and feeling alive, they're not the same thing. At first, the quiet felt like peace. But peace is earned. This wasn't that. This was absence disguised as order. It was a silence that didn't comfort. It accused. It crept in slowly, settling into the corners of the house like dust you stopped noticing. It lived in the mirror where she used to put on her lipstick, and in the space beside me in bed, where the sheet stayed tucked, untouched. It echoed in the front door that didn't open at 5:42, in the sound of only one set of footsteps, in the way the light from the hallway didn't spill over onto her side of the closet anymore. She didn't leave with a storm. There were no slammed doors, no suitcases thrown downstairs. She left the way a candle dies, not with a scream, but with a flicker you didn't realize was the last. And when she was gone, I started to find her in the strangest places. The grocery list still stuck to the fridge, written in her quick, beautiful handwriting. Almond milk, berries, oat flour. That old sweater of hers, the one with the loose thread on the sleeve, still resting over the back of the chair, like she might return any minute. And then there was the scent. lavender and something softer, still clinging to the closet air. Like it hadn't accepted she was gone either, but the part that wrecked me was realizing how invisible she had become. While she was still here, I didn't see her going, because she didn't scream. She just faded, smaller and smaller, day by day, until one morning she disappeared entirely. And then one day, scrolling through social media, I saw her, not tagged, not posing, not just captured. Mid-laugh, sunlight catching the side of her face, book in hand, legs tucked up on a porch swing, and I swear, she looked like someone who had remembered how to breathe. She looked full, not in the way makeup or smiles pretend. To be full in that rare, hard-earned way, like someone who had come home to herself, and that shattered me, because I finally saw what I hadn't when she was inches from me every night. She didn't leave to run from me. She left the version of herself she had to become in order to stay with me, a quieter version, a smaller version, a woman who folded, her thoughts to fit inside my comfort zone. She didn't want more effort. She wanted air, room, oxygen for the parts of her that had been holding their breath for years, and I mistook her quiet for peace, stillness for security, her silence for satisfaction. But she wasn't quiet because she was content. She was quiet because she was disappearing. So when she left, she wasn't choosing loneliness over love. She was choosing wholeness over erasure, a self she no longer had to apologize for. And that was the moment I finally heard the truth. She'd been whispering long before her voice went silent. She didn't want to be saved. She wanted to be seen. For a long time, I thought she walked away from me, from us, from everything we'd built, from the life we shared. And in some ways, that's what hurt the most, because I didn't understand what I had done. I hadn't yelled. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't hit. I hadn't left. But maybe that was the problem. I thought that not doing harm was the same as offering love. The longer I sat with the silence she left behind, the more I realized I'd been asking the wrong question all along. It wasn't, why did she leave me? It was, who did she have to become in order to stay? And the answer to that shook me. She didn't leave me. She left the version of herself she had been forced to mold around my absence. She left. The woman who silenced her thoughts to avoid tension, who learned to tuck her needs behind mine, who shrunk in conversation so I could feel like a man, who disappeared emotionally so I wouldn't have to show up. Carl Jung said, everything we refuse to face in ourselves becomes our shadow. And I think she got tired of living in mine, and worse, tired of carrying her own. I thought I was a loving man. I did what I believed husbands are supposed to do. I worked hard. I stayed loyal. I kept the lights on, the bills paid, the routines intact. But love isn't measured by boxes checked on a list. It's not about what you avoid doing wrong. It's about what you intentionally choose to offer every day, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's emotional. She used to tell me things, gently, carefully, not demands, just soft truths, like how she missed feeling inspired, or how she felt out of place in crowds I brought her into, or how it hurt when I stopped reaching for her hand in public and I'd brush it off, smile, say something light, or worse, go silent. Because I didn't know what to do with a woman's sadness, and I certainly didn't know what to do with my own. No one ever taught me that presence is more powerful than solutions, that listening without fixing is its own form of strength, that love doesn't always need answers. Sometimes it just needs a witness. But I had spent a lifetime being stoic, unshakable, the man who held it together. And in doing that, I never let her see the parts of me that didn't have it together. The fear, the guilt, the longing to feel safe in someone else's arms too. I never gave her that version of me, the honest one, the human one. So she gave herself what I wouldn't: room to breathe, room to be, room to stop disappearing. And that's what broke me open the most. Not that she left, but that she stayed for so long, trying to be seen by someone who never looked deep enough. Her absence was not rebellion. It was restoration. It took her leaving for me to realize she wasn't asking me to be perfect. She was asking me to show up, raw, real, open, present, and I never gave her that, not until it was too late. There was a time, not long after. She left when I thought about chasing her, driving to her new place, standing at her door with flowers or apologies, telling her I'd changed, telling her I finally understood. Maybe even getting down on one knee, not to propose, but to beg for one more chance. But I didn't, not because I didn't want her back. God, I did. There were nights I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over her name, rehearsing a message I never sent, but something inside me knew I hadn't earned that moment. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because deep down, I was only just beginning to face something I'd spent a lifetime avoiding. Myself, avoiding stillness, avoiding softness, avoiding the aching, messy, beautiful parts of me that I was taught were too much. I had learned how to hold it together, to stay calm under pressure, to fix things, solve problems, stay composed. But when it came to love, to presence, to emotion, I was absent, and maybe that's why I couldn't meet her where she needed me, not because I didn't love her, but because I had never learned how to love myself without conditions. One night, weeks after the dust had settled and the house no longer smelled like her shampoo, I sat in the living room. No distractions, no TV humming, no glass of whiskey to blur the truth, just me and the weight of everything I hadn't said. And somewhere in that silence, I whispered something I hadn't said out loud in years. I don't know if I'm okay, but I want to be. It didn't echo, it didn't feel brave, it just felt real. No one heard it, but it was the most honest I'd been in decades, and in that raw, unguarded moment, something inside me cracked, not in a way that broke me, but in a way that made room. Because I finally saw it, I didn't want to win her back, not really. I wanted to learn how to love without disappearing, to show up without losing myself, to feel without fleeing, to sit with my own sadness so I could one day hold someone else's. Because maybe love isn't about fixing everything. Maybe it's about choosing not to run when it gets uncomfortable, about staying, not for her, but for me, and for the first time in my life. I wasn't planning to leave. I was learning how to stay. For the longest time, I saw her leaving as the end of us, a breakup, a failure, the kind of loss that leaves you wondering what more you could have done. But now, I see it differently. She didn't leave to hurt me. She wasn't trying to make a point. She wasn't chasing freedom just to run. She was walking towards something much more sacred, herself. And the truth I hadn't seen, the one that stings the most, is that she didn't leave first. I did. I left every time I shut down. Instead of leaning in, every time I heard the sadness in her voice and chose to stay quiet rather than say, "Talk to me." Every time she needed me emotionally, and I thought being in the room was the same as being present. She was alone for a long time, even when we were still side by side. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are," and that's what she did. Not in rebellion, but in clarity. She stopped waiting for someone else to validate her worth. She went inward, faced her wounds, made peace with her shadows, and the day she walked away, she didn't just leave a house. She stepped out of the version of herself that kept shrinking just to survive, beside a man who didn't know how to meet her there. She chose wholeness over half-love, and that choice was her quiet revolution. But here's the part I never expected. Her leaving didn't just free her. It cracked something open inside of me too. For the first time, I started to hear what she'd been trying to say. Not with words, but in moments. The pause at the dinner table, The sigh before bed, the quiet way she used to say, "I'm fine," when what she meant was, "I'm disappearing." She never wanted me to fix her. She wanted me to see her. She never needed control. She needed truth. What if love was never about possession? What if it was about making space for both of us to fully become who we were meant to be? That's what she was asking for, not in demands, but in presence. And that's what I couldn't give her, not until she was gone. She didn't need more of me. She needed more of herself. And now I finally understand. So do I. There's a kind of loss that doesn't come with screaming or slammed doors or dramatic exits. It comes quietly, through all the things you didn't say. Through the years, you convinced yourself that showing up physically was enough. If you've ever loved someone, but didn't know how to love them well until it was too late, then maybe you know what I mean. If you've ever watched a woman gather her strength, walk out and never raise her voice, not because she stopped caring, but because she was tired of caring alone, then you're not the only one. There are thousands of men sitting in quiet rooms tonight, looking at empty chairs, holding memories in their hands like photographs they never thought would fade, and wondering, was she ever really mine? Or was I just standing next to someone who was slowly slipping away? So if this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of a time you didn't speak, didn't reach out, didn't stay emotionally present, then don't stay silent now. Say something. Just one sentence. I'm learning how to show up without disappearing, not for attention, not for applause, but because telling the truth, even in a comment box, can be the first small step back to yourself. And if you've ever believed, she left because she gave up on you, maybe it's time to consider this. She didn't walk away from love. She walked toward wholeness. And now, maybe it's your turn too.